So today I'm chatting to the lovely Paula. Hi, Paula, welcome.
Hello, Kish. Thank you for having me on your channel.
You're welcome. So, Paula, tell us a bit about yourself and your channel.
Okay, so I've recently started a new YouTube channel. It's called Green and Well. It's basically a mix of the things that I like doing in terms of the green things like gardening, growing things, all things to do with nature, and that includes the home living and design and all that. So it's really just that my interest. But the well part taps into my background in healthcare, but also in the last few years, I have been an independent health and wellness coach, predominantly aiming at sort of families and women's health in particular. Everyone's talking about perimenopause and menopause.
Yes, and today we are chatting about perimenopause and menopause, and we are giving an overview of it. So, from your understanding, what is perimenopause and what is menopause?
So, from my understanding, perimenopause is basically part of the woman. And menopause is part of a woman's, I suppose, menstrual and life cycle. Really, it's typically people are women can experience perimenopause from early 30s or even or as late as like mid to late 50s. Everyone, it's individual. And there are lots of reasons why that might happen. So you do hear about women who said that they went into early menopause. There are also women who have gone into either perimenopause or menopause because they've had surgical interventions, like maybe a hysterectomy. So it goes across many things. For some women, it's a great, they embrace the change, and or they have very little symptoms, and they just sort of glide through that chapter. But for some women, it can be more challenging because they may experience lots of perimenopausal symptoms. So yeah, so that's and also yes, and the other thing as well, in particular, that menopause is classified as basically not having had a period for 12 months in succession. So if you're still having periods, then you're in that age group, then you're in perimenopause.
Yes, that's true, Paula. Thanks for that thorough description of perimenopause and menopause. And I was actually watching a video of a woman, and she said, when she went through perimenopause, it completely disrupted her life to the point that she quit her job. She was severely depressed. What are your thoughts about that? When women go through that deep depression and where they actually can't function anymore.
So that's really it's very it's sort of hard to hear about that, and I do know of stories about that, and I think in general, I think actually it's probably a lot more common than we realise, and maybe to varying degrees. So maybe yes, for maybe a mild sort of depression, mood changes to severe. I think the one of the big challenges, or the thing or big movement that's been going on, is about GP, your local doctor or GP, recognising that the a depression may be because of perimenopause as opposed to a proper what is classified as depression. So in first instances, it would be good if you can find someone you can speak to, a professional, to get that diagnosis. And also then to maybe look into things like checking your hormone levels. And that's something that I don't think it's that common yet. I think it's just starting. People just like to have that conversation about, do we need to know what our hormone levels are? And is this symptom of my mood change? Is it perimenopause? Because again, if it's affecting you to the point where you can't, function or go to work, that's something that needs to be seriously looked at. So yeah, so my thoughts are basically, if you're having a symptom that's causing you not to be able to function, then yes, definitely you need to see a doctor.
Yes, and in terms of some of the symptoms, right? People can have difficulty sleeping, they can have brain fog. What are some of the symptoms that you know about?
So apparently there are meant to be officially, I think 40, it could be, don't get me, it might be 41 actual perimenopausal symptoms. And they range from things like, so the most common things that you probably hear most people talking about is sleep issues, hot flushes, brain fog. And also not memory, so brain fog and other things like skin changes, so dryness of skin. But I've heard that people have had symptoms to do with having restless legs, tingling feet and fingers, obviously the mood things that we've talked about, the depression possibly, also just things like people not feeling just different, they don't feel the same energy levels, the big one, fatigue. Sometimes there are things like changes in, it's almost like being pregnant, but changes in taste buds and things like that. Just reactions to just the environment. I've heard about people having anxiety. I do know of someone I know of who basically found it difficult to to continue driving. She actually was a big driver, drove, work and everything, but
Yes.
said that she couldn't do it. She actually got like very high anxiety and anxious, and so some also that not wanting to do the things that you used to do or feel confident doing, that change. So as I said, there are lots of different symptoms that and I said people have said there are about 40 or 41 symptoms.
Yes. And imagine for a woman who symptoms and doesn't know about perimenopause, they must be thinking, what is going on with me?
Yeah.
They must be so confused about it because, yes, like you said, there is messaging around perimenopause and menopause, but there isn't much. When a woman goes through being pregnant and starting a family, there's a lot of information about that. But the other end of it, perimenopause and menopause, there seems to be not so much of a push for that information to be shared.
So depending on where you live and whoever's watching the channel, where you're coming from. So in the UK, there's been especially I would say the last couple of years, and in particular last year, there's been a lots of talk about menopause and perimenopause, and there's like almost like a whole movement with this, with women in women's health, probably because some of it was on the agenda with the government. So there was a sort of a women's health agenda policy, but there's been this whole thing about menopause being recognized and having assistance in the workplace. So in terms of getting that information, there are, depending on, obviously, again, if you work for maybe a larger company that has big HR department and is very engaging, doing lots of things for well-being for employees, then there is signposting out there. And also if you've got like a very engaged GP practice, or your GP is very very informative about this, then you can get information. But I think on the whole, it's a mixture, and I think also it's there's, I suppose, some cultures or some people don't talk about, or I know this from my own background, some cultures or heritage, it's not talked about. It's almost in like, well, yes, we went through it's just a natural time of a woman's life. I don't know what the problem is, but again, this will depend on how your own experience will depend on how much information you need. If you feel like I said at the beginning, some women have just almost like felt like they've just glided into the change, or they've just known what to do, it's been fine, they've managed it. And whereas there's other women who are experiencing severe symptoms, and there are reasons that they're saying why this might be happening, and it could be around things that we could touch on later, about around diet, lifestyle, and things like that, and genetics as well.
Yes. And, obviously women need to know this information, but men are also it would be very helpful for men to understand what their partners or their wives are going through. So as a man, how do you think a man can support a woman who's going through perimenopause or menopause?
Well, very different. It's not an easy one. I think your husband or partner, whoever you live with, they should have a good idea of you and your routine, your character, what you do. And I think it's about noticing changes in, if you start that, because that's one of the things that some men have said, if they notice that they're, and even not just men, even your children may notice that maybe your mood's different, or something that would you be maybe be fine about before, but now you're maybe more agitated, or something's different. So I think noticing things like that. And of course, your age, because that's the big marker. If, say, you know, your husband noticed that when you turned 40 or 45 or 50, 55, that things started, you were there was some changes, or they've noticed things, then I think that's the one thing. And then of course empathy, and some sympathy, a bit like when you're also, like when we have premenstrual, those days when we don't feel great, and then come back up again.
Yes.
But I think it's having that patience and understanding, and maybe willing to support where you can. It just sometimes it could just be little things, like, for instance, maybe if, say, you're suffering from night sweats or hot flushes, maybe things like discussing about, maybe you might need to make changes in within in the bedroom, like maybe have the window open, or get a fan, or the duvet sharing maybe needs to be changed, and those are sort of little things like that can be helpful. And I think just encouraging your wife to maybe seek help where needed. And it could be things it could be something about discussing things like possibly HRT, or what would that mean, and or going for investigation. So those are the sort of things that I think is a good sort of starting point. Just having that initial empathy, listening, letting letting your wife or partner be heard, and then and also looking at whether you need to make adjustments within your home life.
Yes. And I think that's so key what you mentioned about open communication, because how often do husbands or partners sit down with their wives and vice versa and actually say, let's talk about this? I don't know any couple actually actively did that. So I think that would be really helpful, because you also don't want your partner to feel like what is going on and they don't know how to help. And the woman as well shouldn't feel like she's alone in it. Because I mean, it is, for some people, it is a big change. Like you said, for some people, they just like the transition. And for others, it's like their whole life has been turned upside down. And the part about children helping, when I mentioned that lady who lost her job and who felt severely depressed, she called her daughter, and her daughter actually came to visit her mum. And then they called a counselor, and the counselor counseled her the next day. And then she went onto HRT, and that really transformed things for her. So, it's so important to have a system of care and support.
Yes, I agree.
And with the women that you've helped with perimenopause and menopause, what are some of the things that you helped them with? And what are some things that worked well in trying to help them?
Okay, so with the women that I've helped, it's a lot of it's been a more the I would say the practical side of being going through going through perimenopause, but also coaching through like their work, because obviously it could be that they've come to see me because they're having some issues, but they've also got life things going on. It could be that they're that I've had women who've got who are working, or they've got their own business, but then they've noticed that they're they've been affected, there's something going on with them. So we've been able to sort of have the coaching sessions about not just the things that they need help with their day to day, but also to talk about just to be heard about what's going on with them, and maybe look at whether they need to have a lifestyle audit. It's an expression, that term lifestyle audit is something that I actually took from Dr. Mindy Peltz, who talks a lot about things like to do around what women should do from 40, or how we should be living our lives, and making some changes, especially if you're in a very go kind of sort of situation. And I think that's where the perimenopause symptoms can actually be more extreme. I think if there are things that you haven't looked at. So after, obviously, when we get up to age 30 plus, that's when things start changing in terms of our hormone levels, and just things in general. And it's also typically a time when our lifestyle change it could be happening as well, in terms of what we're doing in the workplace, or where we are with our family lives, and if you're looking your responsibilities. So there's certain things that worked when we were younger But as we age, or as we mature, shall I say, we need to look at those sort of things, because there are a lot of things that we were doing before don't always that won't necessarily work when you're in the perimenopause phase. So things like your diet, your lifestyle stresses, those kind of things, and it will affect, and it can have an effect on, the way your body responds to going through perimenopause to menopause.
Yes. And I know some women, they are maybe late 30s, 37, 38, 39, and they are experiencing perimenopause symptoms, but they may go to a doctor and they may say, well, no, I don't think you are actually going through perimenopause. So in that regard, I would encourage the woman to seek a second opinion, because sometimes it's so essential that you go to the right doctor who actually listens to you. Because
Mm.
sometimes we think like, okay, if this doctor said, no, I'm not going through it, then that is definitely the correct answer. And we are
Yeah.
afraid to actually go for a second opinion. But sometimes going for that second opinion is really, really important. Um, when you are listening to these women, do they often go for second opinions, or do they just stop at one doctor and that's it?
I think the first thing, before we even talking about second opinion, is about acceptance of
Okay.
that what's going on, because I think that's the biggest thing. And I don't know about how you feel, but for me, I didn't, because, and a lot of women will probably might say the same thing. Didn't really, no one, because no one was really talking about perimenopause up until maybe the last year or couple of years, I would say. I didn't really, I wouldn't have, I wasn't thinking about, oh, I need to, go to the doctor, or I'm feeling a bit different, or you'd heard about hot flushes and things. Again, a lot of time thinking that that's happening, way into,
Yes.
the 50s, that kind of thing. If but beyond that, no one, all the other symptoms, like we've discussed, I didn't have a clue. So I think then accepting that and knowing that when you get to this age group, like mid 30s onwards, to start listening to your body more, and actually thinking that it could be that it's not everything is perimenopause, and it may be you maybe can get mildly, it might be something mild, but I think it, like I said, if it's something that is that severe, then you need to then definitely think about getting the second opinion and support where you can. And we haven't really talked about the fact that there's a whole debate about HRT as well, because there are some people who feel that they don't want to go on HRT, and it's mixed. Not everyone. Some people have had great success with HRT, and some people, not they've had it's a bit of trial and error. And again, that's something that again is very individual, and it will depend on who you see and your hormone levels, which hormone needs, because of the whole, we haven't really talked about the estrogen and progesterone. So all the thing of where you might be, you've got too much estrogen, or not enough progesterone. So there's different things that can happen that could be affecting could be the reason behind the possible hormone imbalance.
Yes. And yes, like you said, I actually only found out about perimenopause very recently. I'm 41 years old, and I obviously knew of the term menopause, but not perimenopause. So I'm also still learning about it. And I actually thought, yes, it's way off in your late 50s. I didn't even know that you could get symptoms in late 30s, early 40s.
Yeah.
I had no clue
Mm.
about that.
Yeah.
So it's
Um,
quite surprising.
It is, and I think there was a study done. I think it was done in the US, but they did say also that there's possible there's a possible they've had some findings that there could be differences in races as well. So they did a study across sort of white American women, Hispanic, Latino, and African American women, and they found that there's a possibility that sort of Hispanic women and women of African heritage, or African American, were possibly going into menopause earlier, so perimenopause earlier. So maybe average age more like sort of mid to sort of early to mid 40s, and non sort of like women, sort of white women, sort of starting perimenopause symptoms a little bit later, so late 40s to sort of early 50s.
Okay.
So that's and then of course you've got, and then around that you've got the outliers where women who've literally started a lot earlier than that, like in their 30s. So I think that's why it's important as a woman to sort of, the conversation's been going on at the moment about women's health and about we should be looking at our whole life cycle really of our health. Then I think this is where we need to educate young girls as well, to say that it's not just about puberty. It's going everything, puberty, all the issues around that. If you any women, if you have childbearing, if you're going into what happens with that, with pregnancy, and beyond into perimenopause, menopause. So we should be having the whole sort of 360 of what can happen in a woman's health, sort of menstrual life cycle.
Yes. And not having this part be so invisible.
Yeah.
And in our next video, we are going to discuss how being a person of color, how we actually learn about perimenopause and menopause, and why maybe in our families it isn't so openly discussed as well. And Paula, anything else that you'd like to add in this discussion?
Yeah, I think it's I think the main thing is that it's just start, is if you, I mean, maybe not to be sort of like, if you feel like you've been sort of like head in the sand, not, don't want to fight, and you haven't found someone to talk to, find someone that you can talk to about it. It could be whether it's a girlfriend, a relative, or a health professional. Is to start, basically having that conversation, and or your partner, your husband, and really not to sort of like feel alone with the symptoms, and just genuinely to make the start to get any help if needed, because as women we're all going to go through it, and I think it's just more about, there's no shame in it, it's happening, and I think it's just, how do we get the support that we need, and ideally early enough.
Yes, that's so true. I think what you said about there's no shame in it is so powerful, because there's such a stigma around it. Like, let's keep this all secret. Let's not talk about this.
Mm.
We need to
Yeah.
break through that silence. So
Yeah.
thank you, Paula.
Thank you for having me, Kish. It's been great.
It has been, and we'll chat again soon.
Thank you very much. I look forward to the next episode.
Me too. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.